want to talk to you guys about flipping your classroom. So, this is a pretty innovative format that has come about in recent years, and I think it's a really, really neat idea, and I think we could all learn a lot from it. So, what is it? Basically, what you would traditionally do in class is now done at home, and what you would traditionally assign as homework is now done in class. So, it's exactly what it sounds like, it's in the name. Your lecture that you would normally do is now recorded in a video format, and you assign that as the student's homework. I typically keep that about 10 to 15 minutes. And then what you normally assign as homework outside of class, you do in class. So that aligns a little bit more with that we shouldn't grade homework, it's practice. You can now do that in class. Students are allowed to make mistakes without fear of a grade. And it allows you more time. So, like I talked about, this is you typically done in the format of a video. Maybe you make a presentation, you work on some examples, you do a screencast, however you want to deliver the information. The students watch that as their homework prior to coming to class the next day, and then you work on that in class. So, what's really nice is that you can work on the homework because the teaching component of the lesson is already over, and you can really use now this 50 minutes, whatever it is you have, to check for understanding, work with students who are struggling, or complete a hands-on activity you otherwise wouldn't have had time for. And more teachers are flipping their classrooms and seeing great success with it. So, there are a couple of reasons to flip your classroom. One, it utilizes the technology we're constantly surrounded by in an educational way. The fact of the matter is, it's not going away. We are surrounded by tech 24/7, and most of these kids have grown up with it. So if we don't use technology in our class, there's going to be a disconnect there, and we're not speaking their language. So we've got to use tech to kind of connect to them, relate to them, and frankly, that's how they know to take in information. That's what they've grown up with. Flipping your classroom is also going to help those busier students. They can manage their time better, they can plan ahead, they know their homework's always going to be a 10 to 15 minute video prior to coming to class. I think that helps them with college prep a little bit because you see that a lot in universities. And they can schedule that around, basketball practice and band practice and whatever else it is they're doing. So flipping also allows you to differentiate your classroom. Your time is no longer consumed in just delivering the information. You're now free to help those students who may be struggling. You can group them together and kind of provide some more resources, help them through the material. And if you've got a couple of gifted learners in your class, you can group them together and, not assigning more homework, but assigning maybe a tougher challenge that they can work on so they're not bored in that class. So pros of flipping your classroom: with the videos, you can pause and speed up your teacher. I know how many times I've been sitting in class and trying to take down notes and the teacher goes too fast and I miss half of it. Well, that's infuriating, but if I can just watch a video, I can pause the lecture, maybe do more research where I need to. I can speed up if this is review for me. There's just a lot of opportunities that way. You can also clear up any confusion from the lesson the next day in class. Learning becomes student-centered. It's really more their job now than yours. You're still delivering the content, but it's kind of their duty to understand it. And as they progress through this, they're going to understand that more and more. And when you do that, you get to act as a guide rather than as an instructor. And that kind of motivates students to do their own learning because they can really see, a direct correlation between the amount of time they're putting in, the amount of work they're putting in, and the outcome of those efforts. So, and like I said, fact of the matter, students are going to be spending a lot of time in front of a screen anyways. An argument against this type of learning is that, well, it's more screen time. Completely understand that, but odds are most kids are going to be spending time in front of a screen anyways, so they may as well be learning something from it. You can clear up misconceptions right from the get-go, which I think is huge. Instead of teaching the material and then go home, do the homework, where I know a couple times I've taught myself wrong because I didn't understand the lesson. Well, instead, if they don't understand the lesson from the get-go, they can come to class and ask questions. And as they're doing that homework in class, you can catch them making mistakes before they kind of ingrained the wrong information in their brains. And it allows for more student choice in your classroom. As with everything, there are a couple downsides. The transition to flipping might be slow. So it usually takes at least 2 weeks for students to kind of get into the swing of things. Again, they're already pretty fluent in the technology side of things, but just getting that new format down is going to be a little bit tricky because especially at the high school level, they've known this one way of doing education, so to speak, for, 15 years. So the transition might be a little slow, and students can't ask questions about the video in real time like they would in a traditional class setting, but that's pretty easily overcome because you could just have them write down their questions and bring them to class the next day. I usually start off class with a short Q&A session anyway. And something you've got to factor in is sometimes the technology just doesn't work. Wi-Fi can be a problem if you're in a rural area. This may be extra difficult, so you've always got to have a backup plan in case stuff just doesn't work. You've also got to factor in socioeconomic status. Not everybody has the same and necessary technology at home. So if that's the case for like a vast majority of your students, flipped approach probably is just not feasible. If that's the case for one or two of your kids, then you can find a way to work around that. Local library, there's a couple ways to do that. So a couple of examples, say we're in an English classroom, a flipped English classroom, and we're reading Macbeth. So I as the teacher could assign a video for homework where I maybe read through Act 1, give a brief synopsis of it, or just kind of a short review so the kids know what it's about. And then in class the next day, I can check for understanding, and then again, I talked about that little Q&A session, and then jump into maybe like we act out the play and the kids get to act out a couple of scenes from Act 1. That's hands-on, it's engaging, and it's way more fun than just, reading the play. In a flipped math classroom, if I were doing transformations and translations, I would record a video explaining how to do them, a couple of examples, and then in class the next day, we could work to clear up any confusion, and then, again, group students have them practice on their own, essentially do their homework in class, and then I am walking around as a guide, helping students where they're stuck. In a flipped science setting, say we're studying chemical reactions, I could assign a video explaining the reactions. Here's, why this happens the way it does. Here's what happens when you add this in. And then we can actually recreate the reaction itself together in class. And I know as a student, I would much rather watch a short 10-minute video and understand the material before I get to class and then get to see it happen before my eyes. That would be far more engaging for me. So kind of like we talked about, flipping your classroom can do a lot of stuff for you. It provides you with just a lot of opportunities because you have that time back. Making the videos can be a lot of work, but once they're done, and you can reuse them again in the future. And I think it's important to note that your pedagogy drives the technology and not the other way around. You are still very much in control of what your students are learning, but they can just learn it at their own pace and with a little bit more student choice. But this is not a free-for-all. This is not you taking a seat back. This is a different approach to learning, which, I think is necessary because we have all the data we need to tell us that we're falling behind other leading world countries, and we can't afford to do that anymore, so something's got to change. Also, what's pretty neat is that, students with IEPs, 504s, documented learning disabilities, dyslexia, say, they can digest the content in a variety of ways and really do so at their own pace. They can slow it down, they can speed it up, they can just listen to the content if they want. You've got resources available with technology, you've got text-to-speech, closed captioning, translation services. If you've got an English language learner in your class, you're not sitting there trying to translate hard copy material. You can hit a couple buttons and boom, it's in Spanish, whatever else. And that just makes your job a lot easier and frees you up to focus on what you want to focus on, which is, for example, getting to know your students. You can spend that hour in class instead of lecturing at them, kind of it's you versus them mentality. You're working with them, and it's you and them versus the problem. And when you can build positive student relationships, you can help those learners grow, and they're going to do better just as people growing up, knowing that you're in their corner. But don't just take my word for it. The International Society for Technology and Education wrote a book about flipping your classroom, and it basically details the story of these two high school science teachers who, back in 2008 or so, wanted a different approach to learning. Again, they knew the traditional system wasn't working, and so they flipped their classrooms, and this book is basically has detailed their experiences and the successes they've seen with it. So a quote I really liked is, we no longer stand in front of our students and talk at them for 30 to 60 minutes at a time, and this radical change has allowed us to take on a different role with our students. So again, like I talked about, the students see you as more of a help in their life instead of just kind of this being who assigns them homework. So it's a shift in the mentality too. And then a different research article was kind of analyzing two different types of flipped classrooms, and researchers found that both classes had significant improvement in procedural knowledge. So again, this promotes more student problem solving instead of after 5 seconds going to you and asking for help. It's more on them to kind of figure out the problem, and then you're definitely there to provide help, but there is strength in the struggle, and they can work on it a little bit longer instead of just giving up. The flipped classroom also aligns really well to EUDL. With multiple means of engagement, Students are responsible for their own learning, which really motivates their own learning. They can work with the content in a way that engages them, and then they have that class time again to maybe work on topics that interests them, and they can kind of create their own curriculum in a sense. And I mean, student choice is huge, and that's going to increase their own engagement right there. Um, with multiple means of representation, information is presented in a variety of formats. Again, we've talked about auditory, visual, kinesthetic, and a bunch of different learner preferences are all covered. And that's just in the video itself. And then imagine the freedom you have in class to do a bunch of these different hands-on activities or take a field trip, whatever it is. And then with action and expression, students can demonstrate their learning in a variety of formats. Say you've got a big summative assessment coming up, you could do, a presentation, a musical number, a 3D technology display, really anything that they see as fit, just because you have that time back to allow students to kind of show off their creative sides. And the flipped classroom learning environment, it promotes individualistic as well as collaborative learning. So, like we talked about, students can learn at their own pace. And I know that I would have really liked that because I moved pretty fast through like English and Spanish, but I really struggled in math. So being able to kind of learn at my own pace would have been huge in high school. I would have liked that a lot better. But you still come together in class. It's still that collaborative structure. You're still working on the material together, and it's this sense of, we're in this together. We can get through it. And so you still have that collaborative sense there. Also want to point out this model is not encouraging a move to completely online learning. I did not like that. Should that become necessary, say COVID were to blow up again, you're going to have a much easier time moving online because half of your content is already online. But again, not encouraging a complete move to online learning. This is just here should the world decide to end again. We've got a little bit of an insurance policy in our back pockets. It also doesn't allow the teacher to just sit back. Again, like even during that class time, you're not at your desk drinking coffee. You are helping kids with questions, clearing up any confusion, maybe doing out some examples on the board. You're still spending time with those students, encouraging their learning. And student choice is really at the heart of differentiated learning. The flip model opens the gates to this type of learning. And when we provide students with their own choice, they get really invested in their own learning, and I think that's huge. So there's a couple of references, and that's really all I have for you, and then a handout as well.